more Nintendo news. This is a very Nintendo-heavy podcast.
This comes from Sega country.
This comes from Sega country?
It does.
We're going to get into politics and economics a little bit, but the news that's come out, Nintendo officially announced, is that they are done selling products in Brazil due to high tariffs and taxes. Now, if you don't know what tariffs are import taxes.
Right.
So what happens is a country, for whatever reason, you can say it's antiquated, but most countries have done this in the past. It's a way to make sure your economy can fairly compete, in theory, against importing. So say for example, you import TVs from another country, but you produce TVs yourself, but the TVs you produce in your own country cost more for whatever reason. So to be able to fairly compete, you put a tariff on products coming in that on these companies, forcing them to raise the price so that the price more matches what your economy is producing. It's very... countries still do this, but not for mainstream products, especially video games,
right,
for the most part. Now, I did read that Brazil did try to do this. They did this to Apple, forcing Apple to set up some sort of shop in Brazil so they wouldn't cost a huge amount of money.
Microsoft actually set up shop in Brazil so they could manufacture Xbox Ones.
So what you're looking at is this. So the Wii U, when it launched in Brazil, cost $830 US. So that was more than double what it costs in the US. That's due to tariffs and taxes that Nintendo had to pay, and they had to make up the cost there. That's a huge tax to pay.
And what the thing is much like you said with tariffs and their original purpose, what is Nintendo competing against that Brazil's making?
Yeah. For example, the games then had to be marked up to $87 US versus probably 50 or 60. That's like a 50% increase. That's a lot of taxes Nintendo's paying. And I hate to say it, a lot of this sounds a little bit like a little corruption. They probably wanted a payout from Nintendo to sort of, maybe they wanted Nintendo to grease the wheels a little bit in order to get their product in there. And Nintendo probably said, we're not playing ball. Fuck you. We're going to leave.
Right. Well, so what they've said is, they mentioned Nintendo could bypass this by setting up a plant in Brazil to build. Right. Well,
why would they? That's the thing, though.
Microsoft did, and now Microsoft has a strong hold in Brazil. I mean, but it's whether or not...
It's a huge investment, though.
But it is. I'm not saying it's small. And I'm not saying that Microsoft is necessarily smart to do it to tackle one region, but Microsoft did it for Xbox One, and the Xbox Ones are like $300, I think like $200 to $300 cheaper than an imported tariffed PS4. It seems to be a problem with large parts of Latin America with games, though. Working in the store that I do on the border, between the U.S. and Mexico, we get a lot of Mexicans who come up and buy games from us because it's cheaper. Mm-hmm. Because what people do is, Nintendo's not gone in Brazil. What's going to replace this is the gray market.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot of secondary sellers come in and
right,
get the product imported themselves and
they'll be
and mark it up themselves.
They'll mark it up. They'll probably
middlemen.
Right.
They shouldn't have to exist.
Right. And maybe they'll be a little bit cheaper, maybe they won't. You see a lot of that in Mexican game stores as well, where, a game that sells for $40 here is selling for $65 or $70 brand new there. When people from Brazil used to come up to... so we live in Ocean Beach, which is it's a very nice beach town. It's homey. A lot of people vacation here. A lot of young kids will come up here and spend their summers, usually from Ireland or Brazil. And when the Brazilians come up to Ocean Beach, they buy out the fucking store. They will buy every video game system they ever could possibly want because they are saving. They tell me literally hundreds, depending. The one guy who bought like Genesis systems for all of his friends and bought like PS3s and stuff like that, he was saving thousands of dollars on taxes by buying these. So I feel bad, but I think people have it backwards. You see a lot of people who are angry at Nintendo for pulling out of Brazil. This is not Nintendo's fault or problem. This is an antiquated and bad use of a tariff system to make all of their products more expensive.
No, unless you're producing the product yourself, the same product in your own country with your own local economy, a tariff at least makes theoretical sense. Here, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Right? There's no native Brazilian
Nintendo, basically.
Yeah.
So again, they're looking for a huge amount of money. Nintendo was probably saying, we're going to spend all our time to get our product, pay these tariffs, and no one's going to buy our product. No one's going to spend $850 on a Wii U. It's not going to make any sense. So why should we put in the time and effort to do the distribution and pay these taxes, and we're not going to sell the products? It makes perfect business sense. They can't, again, they're not going to go to Brazil and make Wii U's there and set up infrastructure, which could take years to properly do. And again, paying off people maybe in Brazil. Brazil is a country that has corruption in the government. So it doesn't make any sense for them to do that. It just doesn't. Well, and it's not like you say, well, it's Apple. Apple has a hell of a lot more money. Microsoft has a hell of a lot more money that they can take a chance and get that immediate money back. Well, Nintendo, that may not happen.
Right, because they sell 3DS. They're a video game company that sells games and game devices. And it's also why we laugh when people say Nintendo is going to die or go under. They're not, because Nintendo doesn't make stupid business decisions. Nintendo is not going to dump money into a facility.
Yes,
here.
And plus, people forget the markup. Nintendo's not making that much money on their Wii U systems.
Well, they make money on their Wii U systems, which is more than most.
But
most
it's not
companies.
like the margin that Apple's making on their iPhones.
No, absolutely.
You know
not.
what I mean? So if it makes sense for a company like Apple to set up shop, because even if it's going to cost them a little bit more money to produce those phones there versus the child labor, sweatshops over in Asia, if they're selling them for $400-$500 and they only cost them $30 each to produce, versus Nintendo maybe costing them $325 per console and they're only making $75. I'm just throwing that out there. That's a huge difference in what you're selling and what you're doing.
Well, and on the global market, Apple sells globally, tons of these things. Nintendo is, and this is not meant to be an insult, but it's like I said, Nintendo is small potatoes compared to Apple. Nintendo is still, by and large, a toy company.
Yeah, and then plus, again, Apple's making that money back, and also an app. They're getting a percentage of all the apps and the sales. Nintendo has to sell the software too, and that's going to get tariffed too, unless it doesn't make sense. It's unfortunate for everyone. It's unfortunate for Nintendo, and it's unfortunate for the people at Brazil that want to get Nintendo products.
I'm fucking surprised Nintendo or Sony even try. I know I understand why Microsoft does now, but I'm really surprised that Nintendo, Sony, or they even went in under any of those conditions.